The title for this movie is pretty redundant. I looked up the meaning of Tzameti before filming this review, and it just means 13. So that would be like if one of the films I talked about in my previous video was called Batman the Batman. Before getting into this review, I should note that 13 Tzameti is in French with English subtitles, so if you don't like reading subtitles, you might not care for this movie. 13 Tzameti follows a young man who is repairing someone's roof when the owner of the house that he's working on ends up committing suicide. This ends up leaving the roofer in a pretty bad spot because he is very desperate for money, and as a result of this, he isn't going to get paid for the job. However, shortly before passing away, the owner of the house received an invitation to an event where he could have ended up making a lot of money, so the roofer ends up stealing this letter and going to that event only to find out that if he doesn't make this money, he is going to lose his life. I like how well this movie grounds itself in reality. With all of the saws out there and even films like Would You Rather, it kind of feels refreshing to have a film where there's no spectacle to the way that people are killed. It's just a very simple, dangerous situation that the main character has led himself into, and you're just following his emotional journey. And the main actor who plays the roofer gives a very strong but subtle performance the entire time that he's being forced to participate in this horrific game. You can feel the paralyzing fear that he's going through. Actually, I don't recall this character having a whole lot of dialogue during the scenes where he was playing the game. Pretty much all of his emotions are conveyed through his facial expressions and body language. The only dialogue that he does have, as far as I can recall, is when one of the gamekeepers comes up to him to make sure that he's doing all right, and he just looks up at him and says, "What do you care?" And really, he is saying what's on everybody else's mind, with the fact that everybody in that place knows that this guy could die at any moment. What do they really care? The only sadness that they're going to feel is if somebody loses money from betting on him like a racehorse. Thinking that one of them actually cares about his life would be like going to a strip club and thinking that one of the dancers actually likes you. I also like the fact that this film was done in black and white. Black and white movies aren't hugely popular nowadays, but in the case of 13 Tzameti, I think that the lack of color does a great job at establishing this overall mood of bleakness throughout the story, and there's even a certain sense of mundanity to it. As this main character is playing this game of life or death, the people who are betting on him give off this air as if it's just another trip to the casino for them. As far as what I didn't like about the movie, first of all, I think it started off really slow, and I fully appreciate the fact that it was building up the character and building up the drama of his life, but as interesting as that was, they could have at least presented it in a more interesting manner. Honestly, I wasn't even remotely invested in the story until he started following the instructions on the invitation that he stole, and that must have been like 20-25 minutes into the film. Also, while most of the dialogue in this movie is fine, there is one point where someone utters quite possibly the dumbest line of dialogue that I have ever read. And I say read because, the movie's subtitled. There's a scene where the main character has a brief conversation with the guy whose roof he's repairing, and that man asks him how old he is. The roofer tells him that he's 22, and I don't know, there must have been something lost in translation here, but according to the subtitles, he says, not exactly quote for quote, but he goes, 22, that's really exceptional. Some people are 25 or 30, but 22, that's something. And by the way, this is a cat. Some animals are dogs, some of them are monkeys, some of them are sea otters, but being a cat, that's something. In the end, despite my criticisms, I thought that 13 Tzameti or 1313 was just good enough to make it worth watching once. Really, It is a well-made film as a whole, but there's nothing about it that's going to motivate me to see it a second time. But I am glad that I watched it, and if you're interested in seeing a well-made modern-day crime noir that is highly suspenseful with top-notch acting, then this film does come recommended. And that's all I've got to say about the movie. I hope you all have a good one.